Thank you for letting me pick your brain a little bit.
For sure, fun to hang out. Yeah,
All
super
right,
fun to hang out.
we'll jump right into it. So I know that a lot of people don't just fall into martial arts. This is something that people luckily find. Maybe they stumble upon. Maybe they fall in love with it as a kid. I would love to know how Robin Black managed to find himself in the world of martial arts.
So I kind of found my way back to martial arts in my late 30s. As a kid, my parents would tell you that I was kind of an odd kid, probably not all that surprising to my friends. And I was a gymnast, and I liked gymnastics. And I did gymnastics and like high diving, platform diving, 3 meter board as a little kid. And I was just obsessed with martial arts. Like I still have, you know, like black belt magazines and like the stuff that I was into when I was like a kid. I, I was obsessed with it. To me, there was something about it that was just really cool. I've always, from the little kid to now, been really curious about human movement. I have a baby, like I'm obsessed with watching her learn to move. So I was really into martial arts as a kid, and I kept telling my parents I wanted to do karate because that's sort of what I knew of as martial arts. And we lived 2 hours from Winnipeg. And I just kind of kept at it long enough until and I had two other brothers, and both my parents worked. And I just stayed on them long enough that they took me to Winnipeg 3 times a week as a little kid to do, I thought it was karate, but pretty quickly I found out it was taekwondo. But, they weren't super worried about, if you liked karate, they'll convince you that it's close enough and you should train this. Anyway, so I did it as a kid. And then as an adult, I kind of meandered into music and a bunch of other things. And sort of, I had like misadventure. I kind of had a seizure from like too much partying on the road, playing with a rock band. And once I kind of got myself together, I was like, okay, I got to get healthy. And I immediately walked into a martial arts gym. That was like maybe 2005. And then I've been in a martial arts gym every week, certainly, and most days kind of since. And it's always been my favorite thing. It's the thing that gets me super jazzed and excited and curious. And yeah, it's other than a brief period of, 8 to 10 years of playing in a rock band, traveling around the world, where I didn't sort of constantly consume or train martial arts. The rest of my life, I always have.
I tell people all the time, martial arts saves lives. I am 1000% convinced that it does. So I understand that you did fight at one point, MMA, right? I'm not making that up.
Yeah, I had 9 pro MMA fights.
So
Yeah.
what made you want to kind of switch gears and go from inside the cage to right next to it as a commentator?
So a lot of times when we talk about our own plans in the past, I think we tend to like rub all the pointy edges off our own stories and other people's stories. That's just sort of how humans kind of make sense of things. But I think that the simple truth is I wanted to commentate fighting. I was training martial arts every day, kind of back at that. And I sung in a rock band. I wore eye makeup and leather pants and had purple hair. And I wanted to commentate fighting. And I thought that was something I was constantly curious about and constantly changing my own perspective about it. And I thought it was something that I could do, and I wanted to do. And I figured, quite rightly, and I know how people who are, possessive of the things they love, like people were going to be like, that guy is not welcome to commentate fighting. So I figured I should fight one time, and I trained like a professional athlete for like all the way through, because I ended up fighting 9 times because I fell in love with it. Probably 6 or 7 years I lived and trained as a professional athlete, 11 sessions a week, diet, exercise, strength and conditioning, recovering, like every aspect. I lived deeply within that world. But yeah, I sort of thought I'll train hard for 2 years and I'll fight. And, that will allow me to understand it on a higher level. I'll do a better job, and maybe people will be more willing to let me do that. Again, I'm editing my own past because we're complex creatures. I had millions of thoughts and fears and anxieties about it. But The
I mean,
simple story.
the first thing I'm catching on to is that like your actual goal was to be a commentator, but you thought to yourself, all right, let me get my feet wet, see what this is really all about. That's so interesting. And I love that. And do you credit your drive to be a commentator as to why you're so good at analyzing? Because I would say that you're one of the better analyzers.
So, well, thank you. So I think I see the job 100% different, I think, than everybody else sees it. Like, and I'm not trying to be critical. This is just strictly an observational thing. But I think most people, especially if you're already a professional athlete or there's other things going on in your life, and this isn't the primary thing. It's a nice thing. You get to wear a suit and someone pays you, depending on the job. Some people get, Michael Bisping probably gets $30,000 a night. It's a great gig. It's a great job. And he's very good, for example. But I think most people, in whatever way, and this is a natural thing, they see it as a role. So tonight, I am in the role of analyst. I don't see analyst as a role. I see analyst as a lifestyle. I analyze shit. And that's what I do. I analyze my life and my daughter and the neighborhood I live in and martial arts and this coffee, and it's a lifestyle. And so I think the role of analyst is, striker versus grappler in a stylistic matchup, winner gets a title shot. Is this the greatest fight of all time? I mean, this has got fight of the night, but that's a role. I don't like to do any of that stuff. I don't like the role. I don't really like sports. That sounds funny. I don't like sports. I like art. I like language. I like martial arts. So I don't do that. I used to do that. And then over time, I realized that like those were all of those structures, all of those parameters, all of those narratives and sound bites and all of those things, those are all limitations. Mm-hmm. They're limitations to what you can say and how to say it, when to say it, how to use your voice. And I just started thinking, I don't want to do any of those things. I just want to be a guy who's like crazy about martial arts, who doesn't say striker versus grappler, knockout power in both hands. Wow, this one's got fight of the night work and this is going to be fireworks. I don't say any of those things. In fact, and I'm not judging anyone who does do that, especially in their first 50 times. If you're a fighter and somebody says, would you like to commentate LFA or whatever, in your first 50 times, it's going to be impossible to do anything but that, because that's what you've noticed is analysis. But in my life, I like to analyze things. I like to look for the poetic beauty in it and the curious nature of it. And what about it physiologically and emotionally and spiritually and historically and all of these things. And all of that operates outside of sort of the parameters of what is a television analyst. So I just don't even think I do the same thing. I don't want to do that job. Like, I don't want that job to be all of those rules and structures. I just want to be a guy who's crazy about martial arts, that when he talks about it, the audience likes it well enough and gets enough out of it that some people will hire me, even though they'd rather I said striker versus grappler in a stylistic matchup, winner gets a title shot. Wow, oh my God, dishing out some ground and pound, it's all over. Wow, it's a early fight of the year contender. I don't want to do any of that. I don't like any of that. It feels weird to do any of that. So I don't do that. But yeah, I think I'm just obsessed with martial arts. Like, when I'm not doing things that I have to do, like I have to go to the airport today to travel to commentate, I'll still watch fights and study fighting and language and art and stuff on it. Or when I'm not, singing my daughter to sleep, or like these other great things in life, I'm curious about martial arts, and I will be until the day I die. And fighting was driven by a necessity if I wanted to get to do this as a living, but also curiosity. Like, I don't think you can actually have, like, you've competed in martial arts, Maddie. The moment that you do, you realize everything you thought about it was like 97% of everything you thought about it is wrong. Mm-hmm. Right? Nobody has ever fought and said, that was exactly what I was expecting. Nobody, ever, right? Because it actually isn't anything like it. And much like some of the wildest experiences in like being a human, like getting married, or like, family things, or like scary things, an accident, or like these really unique human experiences, they cannot be explained and they cannot be understood. And in fact, when we talk about things and we say this guy's using like an L step to do this, and when he goes for the low crotch, if he tucks his face to convert the crotch, a lot of that stuff actually is all just the best words we can use, even though what's actually happening here isn't about how the guy stepped or where he holds the crotch, but about what's going on in his emotions and his fears and his anxieties and his physiology and all of those things. So I knew I could pretend to be a commentator, or I could play the role of an analyst, because that role is an imitation role if I didn't fight. But I knew I couldn't do it the way I wanted to do if I didn't fight. And then I fought one time and I lost. And I thought, okay, well, on my way out, I thought, okay, I'm only doing this once, and give it everything I have. And I gave it everything I had, and I still lost. And I worked really hard, and I trained with great people, and I was super driven, and and I did everything that could be done. I still lost. And I thought, okay, I'm going to fight again and until I win and have that experience. And I did. And then somebody said, if you rematch this guy out in Moncton, we'll put our bantamweight belt up. And I was like, oh my God, I'll fight for a title. I'll have that experience. And then I got, taken out on a stretcher, which was horrific. My wife was watching the online, play-by-play, and they said he's being taken out on a stretcher. The doctor put a thing on his motion for brain damage. By the time I called her in the ambulance, she was bawling and terrified, right? And that's awful. That's like, still telling that story, I feel so awful knowing that she went through that. But that experience changes how I'll commentate tomorrow night in Paris when I get, all of those experiences. They aren't just the experience, but they change the meaning of every single movement that you see in fighting. You have to fight to analyze fighting. There are people who will say, I am a boxing analyst, or I am an MMA analyst, and they don't do martial arts. They're playing the role of an analyst that they've seen other people play, and they're emulating it, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not real. The experience of it. And I had a conversation with Chael Sonnen about this when somebody who's not a martial artist was critiquing him. And I said, Chael, this, like literally 90 or 95 or some monstrous percentage of the information is actually only available within the experience. Mm-hmm. That's just factually true. And not only do you not get that information, but that information feeds the information that you see about how someone uses a feint or slips their head or steps their feet or falls into a rhythm or whatever. And if you emulate a coach or a martial artist who talks about breaking someone's rhythm or using a feint to create hesitation or something, you can't hear what is unsaid. And 99% of that coach or fighter's knowledge is unsaid. So you never get access to it. So fighting is the coolest thing in the world, and it's really hard and it's really scary, and doing scary things makes your life better. So all of those reasons I fought. And that's why I said at the beginning, it's like so easy to tell a story and I'll say, I always wanted to be a commentator, and that's true. But I also wanted to see what I was capable of. And I also wanted to, once I failed and was embarrassed and humiliated that I couldn't do it, I wanted to go back and overcome it. So there was all of these elements, and they're all present every time you fight, and every time you take any risk in your life, and every time something good happens or something bad happens or you fail at something. That's present that's why we do shit. That's why you try hard things, and that's why you push yourself that's why we do all of these things. And that's why we hope other people hear somebody talk about it and they do it, because your life gets better when you do really tough things.
Yeah. I think a huge moment in my life was when I just fully dove into commentating, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. Like I have fought, I have a radio background. I love this shit. I might as well give it a shot. And the love I received back was so overwhelming. And I know I have such a long way to go, but it's refreshing to hear somebody say how it's really not about, oh, that was fantastic, oh, this is fight of the night. Because at the end of the day, I feel like that can be learned. But what you cannot learn is the experience that you get when you do it yourself. So I appreciate that part of it. And so that makes me feel like I'm on the right track here.
You are on the right track. And I'll give you some other insights. And I truly believe, I've commentated, like, I lost count, and I don't have the ability to go back and count them again, because there were like 200 shows of one show on Fight Network. We were doing it twice a week for 3 years. And then, 150 of another. And then, so it's 600 for sure. And I go to Paris once a month. I go to Amsterdam every, 5 weeks. And I'm still, and I'm commentating in Toronto. I go do bare knuckle. Like, in the next 5 weeks, I'm doing 5 shows. I'm doing 3 in a weekend coming up, right? So you're adding to it. So it's 600, 700 shows. And not only did I learn this thing in a different way, and I'm if I talk to Morrow or Michael Chavello or Rogan or somebody about it, we can talk about it knowing what we didn't know 300 shows ago, and then knowing that the meaning is different. But not only that, with commentary, when you do anything to the point where you're pursuing mastery as best you can, knowing you'll never get there and never master it, you learn about the process as it applies to anything. And I think what I'm going to tell you, like advice or like general thoughts I'm going to give you, I think would apply to anything. If somebody wants to be a great gardener or baker or father or whatever, and there's a number of them. And one is, it's really, you have to remember that you will hate your first 10 shows after you've done 150. And that's okay, right? You want that. And at 150, when you're pretty sure it's good, in 200 more, you'll hate that. But all of that is part of the process to mastery in anything. Yeah. Your husband is a master martial artist, and 10 years ago, he was a good martial artist. And 5 years before that, he was a pretty good martial artist. And your neighbor who is a great aviator, this is true of everything, right? Our job is to recognize that whatever we're doing now serves multiple purposes. You got to do the job. Someone hired you to commentate tonight. So you got to do that. But in the process of doing that, this is part of a larger piece of a puzzle to you being great in 15 years, greater, and like the greatest you could possibly be. And so when you go to commentate the show, it isn't just, and it's, of course, is most important. These martial artists are fighting tonight, and these humans are listening, and our job is to enrich the experience. And we've got to do that, number one. But number two, what do we learn tonight that is going to make us better? Either we did it well, and later we'll realize it wasn't as well as we thought, or we didn't do it well. We're going to take notes, and we're going to look at what we do and understand what it'll mean later. And then we're also going to look, and this again is true of anything, what is this job really? Because when somebody asks Henry Cejudo, who's a great martial artist, to commentate, he doesn't, or anyone who's a great performer at the thing, to talk about the thing. They're, without another 6,000 hours of that thing, they're experts at kicking or punching or wrestling. How did they become that? Training, practice, repetitive practice, expert feedback, studying their own process, and repetition. Well, Henry Cejudo or Daniel Cormier or any of us, if we're going to go commentate, it's the same process. We're going to do that same process again. It is not possible that we'll be brilliant in the first 10 shows. I did a show with Yusri Belgal-Rui. He's a glory kickboxer. He was pretty brilliant, and it was one of his first ones. Although that's cool, and you are doing amazing and you feel good about it, and although that's cool, that's in the context of where you could be if you do another 100, you have to look at this as I'm terrible compared to that, or else you can't be great, right? So we're in a constant state, and the more you do that, later you start to disassemble the whole thing. At first, you're like, my job is to be like, and here, when the camera comes to me, say, yeah, and these 2 epic warriors in our main event, at 205 pounds, this guy from the AKA gym is representing that. We're just doing the things that we're pretty sure we should do.
Right.
But we never really pause and go, does anyone give a fuck about any of what I just said? Right. They might feel like they do because that's what they're used to too. But we're going
they want it.
Yeah, and they do want it because they don't know what else is possible.
Yeah.
Your producer actually will also tell you, and he's just, or she is just doing the best job they can. They'll say, stick with the action, and make sure you talk about that. They'll never use the word dumb it down, but they'll say, we've got a lot of casual viewers, which is probably not true. Nobody's watching. Tomorrow I'm doing Aries fighting on Fight Pass. It's a great show out of France. There's not a person subscribed to Fight Pass who watches 12 things a month that we should consider a casual consumer. They love it, right? So why are we talking to them like they're stupid? But our producers will have learned over the years that this is a good way to go. Then we'll say, guys, talk about the main event. Now talk about the coming. Talk about his striking. Talk about his grappling. Well, if we pause for a second, we go, we still talk about striking and grappling as they're separate things, but yet everyone trains them as a fluid thing. Even the great martial artists who are then going to talk about fighting will say, this guy's got amazing takedown defense. It's not really a thing actually anymore, right? Nobody really trains that way, but we still talk that way. So we'll go, okay, and then you're supposed to go, oh man, this one's amazing. Wow, oh my God. And it was a punch, right? And it was a nice punch, a beautiful, well-expressed punch by a great martial artist. But if you're going to yell, oh my God, every time there's a thing, you're going to do 600 shows, nobody's going to believe your passion. Your passion has to be real. It can't be, it has to be, and if it's going to be real, it isn't just, oh, big right hand, wow. Well, that's not real.
Yeah.
What's real, if you love martial arts, is there was something unique about that moment that made the thing stand out in an amazing way. If all that happened is one guy punched another guy or one woman punched another woman, they're unconscious, that's no longer remarkable to you because you've seen it 6,000 times. It is remarkable because there's something unique about that person. And there's something unique about what they did. And that has to be the truth. We're full of shit. We don't feel like we're full of shit because we're doing what we think we should do. But if all you do, wow, big right hand, wow, like you are playing a role even if you don't think you are. Because Joe, who's a mentor of mine, or Moro, or Chabella, or any of these greats, we saw them do that 6 years ago, and now somewhere in us there's the belief that that's what we're supposed to do.
That's it right there. Oh, that's it right there.
It's just hidden in there, right?
I feel like I am faking it till I make it, baby. And I have been watching my idols and I'm like, okay, this is what they do. I should do that. But I have to remember that I have something unique to bring to the table. So that's it right there. I want to switch gears real quick.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say people love the Bink videos, okay? Yeah. The fighters that get to be in the Bink videos, it's like, oh my God, right? Yeah. So when did you start doing these Bink videos? Do you remember your very first one?
So I started doing like this happened, and then there's an arrow, and then the zoom in on here and this. I started doing that at Fight Network in around 2013. And there just wasn't any of that. Now, people had done that in other sports, but it literally didn't exist in fighting. And if there's 12 videos where somebody drew an arrow and zoomed in on a thing, I haven't seen them. But if there were some, actually, I shouldn't say that. There were some related things, like there was somebody named BJJ Scout, and then a guy named Daxlock who did it just in written form. So there were sort of, but analysis just wasn't a thing. Like in 2012, there wasn't a thing. But I had the good fortune of working at a 24-hour television fighting channel. And we had all day, every day to sit with a graphics guy and say, well, what if you do this thing? Can you put a circle on that? So I got to invent it. Like it didn't exist. So I started doing those. And then the UFC kind of hired me for a brief period. Joe Rogan recommended me to Dana, and he said, we're hiring you. You're moving to LA. You're going to work for us. Welcome aboard. You'll have a contract in 3 days. That was like 6 years ago. Still do not have that contract that they mentioned, but I did do a whole bunch of stuff for them that they paid me well for. So I did a bunch of stuff for them, and then I did another 200, 300, 400 for Fight Network. And then they kind of cut all of their content creation. And I was sitting at home, and I was literally like, this is what I do. And my editor is gone, and the television is gone, and the studio is gone, and the makeup artist and the lighting guy, and what do I do? And I went to this about 2017. I had a little bit of money saved when I lost that job, and they shut down, and we were doing very well. We had 150,000 YouTube subscribers in 2016, which was crazy in martial arts. Probably one of the biggest things. Somehow they let that die, but that's story for another day. That's a strategy issue, not a martial arts issue. That's a digital strategy issue. But so I went home and I was like, this is what I do. Like I literally have spent the last few years, I thought I was an expert. Today, I know I wasn't an expert. And in fact, I know today now because of that I'm very early in the journey, and I hope to one day master this, but I'm nowhere near that. And I went home and I bought an iPad. And I was like, okay, well, I got to be able to do this somehow. I had never done anything. I never edited anything. I'd never burned a video off of YouTube. I had no idea. I'm looking at this iPad. And what do? I want to make these videos. And I went on YouTube and I said, how to edit video. Like an 11-year-old girl came up with a YouTube channel. She's like, okay, you take iMovie, you press this button, and you get the video. Oh, cool. And then I'm like, okay, well, how do you burn a video off Twitter? And it's like, her or one of her friends or some other kid, 10-year-old, is like, go to this thing and press this button. And after about 2 days, I had pulled a video off of Twitter or something, and I put it into a thing, and then I got a golf app at the time. It's no longer, that app's been canceled, but it was a golf app where people would like analyze golf swings. And I'd take that video and I'd drop it into the golf app swing, and I'd kind of do the thing, and I'd put it back into the thing, and then I went to the store and I bought a mic, and I talked into it, and all of a sudden, after 3 or 4 days, I made one. Now, again, like I made 300, 400, 500 analysis videos. I got to be on the front end before analysis was a thing. I got to do it in a television network. So I did hundreds before this, but yeah, around 2017, I've made about 2,000 since. I make about 400 or 500 a year now. But again, you want to be good at anything. You're not going to be good in the first 100. You hope. And I do remember actually thinking, if I make 100 of these, I bet I'll be pretty good. And now I've made 2,000, and I realize I'm just trying to figure it out now. Because you have breakthroughs where you realize how rudimentary we do things. And if you really want to do something special, you're going to have to do tens of thousands of them. And then that one day, I was doing the thing that we all do, and that we all think we're supposed to. Oh my God, this is crazy. What a beautiful right hand. And it's just a punch. What was beautiful about it was the individual and the time and the moment and all of these things. And so I'm yelling about beautiful punches, gorgeous takedown defense, all this shit that none of it makes any sense. And then a lot of yelling, boom, bam. And then one day I just did the opposite. I went, pink. And I was like, God, just go away. This idea of screaming constantly is just so commodified. It has no value unless I scream louder and louder and louder and louder. And so I started doing the opposite. My enthusiasm now is in admiration and curiosity and like the knowledge that this is special, but not in the way that if I just yell big right hand, boom, oh my God, dish out some ground and it's all over. Wow, we got a new contender in the welterweight. I could do that. And some people who hire me for work want me to do that, but I slowly try to convince them that the audience might find it more interesting if we don't do that. In fact, and although we think that's what we should do, that in fact, that is the least valuable thing we could possibly do. And I've proven that proves to be true some of the time or much of the time. There are other times, certain environments like, the UFC, and I mean, if you take 1,000 UFC fans, 500 of them are smart and 500 of them want you to yell, oh my God, it's all over. Wow. Fighter night, knockout pound. They want that. If somebody hears this video and they're mad, I don't know why, because they're hopefully in the other 500, and that's a lot. But there are environments where they don't want you to do something more interesting or provocative or experimental but then there are where they do want you to do that. And all of a sudden I make this incredibly good living, like shockingly, like I'm an artist who gets paid like a neurosurgeon and all I do is talk about fighting and it's pretty great.
It's almost like it's like martial arts ASMR though. It's like, think, like, let me play you this video and talk to you really quickly. But guess what? It makes people tune in. It makes people like gravitate towards it. And I just love that. And I think it's pretty clear that one of your strengths is kind of analyzing the fighter, why they're doing a certain thing, that sort of thing. And I think it's so important for fighters to be watching themselves, one, as homework, to be watching their opponents, number two. Do you have advice for fighters, analysts, whatever, on how to properly watch tape? Because I do think that there's a right way and a wrong way. So I'd love to hear how you think people should be using tape as a tool.
So when I see you and Ross in April, May, June, whatever it is, where Ross is going to be fighting and I'll be standing there analyzing it and you're there as part of his team and we're hanging out, we'll talk about this more in depth for sure. But I do suspect what your idea of how to do it and mine are actually quite different. And mine is dorkier and mine is more abstract, because that's often the case. But a big one for me, and this is a big belief for me, but it's not for everybody, is that actually structures, you want to get good enough that the structures that you and I might think are important. So look at the stance, look at the rhythm, look at the footwork, look at make sure you spot, these types of parameters. I believe you want to get good enough that you let them all go, right? That the real level is a level beyond. Make sure you look at this, make sure you look at the distance, make sure you look at the idea of categorizing, here's the striking, here's the wrestling, here's the distance, here's the rhythm, here's the timing. Here's when they breach, the striking distance, here's grappling. To me, you want to get so good at seeing those things that you no longer see those things, because the real art is on the other side of that. The real art is play, right? And I think, and I don't give martial artists advice, because I was a mid-level, bottom-tier competitive fighter. And I'm proud to say that I fought people as a professional athlete, and I won sometimes and I lost sometimes, and I learned a lot. But I'm not accomplished enough to tell a fighter how he should fight. And I'm not a coach, I'm a student. So I will give a coach feedback as a student, but I'm not. Sometimes I see people on, regular people in real life, whether they're talking about movies or like football or fighting or whatever, they'll be like, why didn't he throw the ball? Or that guy should have kept his hands up.
Yeah.
I've learned enough.
My favorite.
Yeah.
Why didn't you just get up? Like, oh,
exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly. I've only, and I mean this, I've only studied martial arts for 40 years. I only had 9 professional fights. I've only commentated 6,000 fights. I've only analyzed 20,000 fights. And I'm not saying that as a fake humility. That's enough now to realize how little that is, right? To realize how little that is. But what I have learned is when you continue to gather information, and this is philosophy from Aristotle through Bruce Lee in the 70s, you want to get to the point that you let all that shit go. So for me now, when I'm watching tape, I am not going, okay, count the things. Okay, left hand, right hand, what stance is he in? I'm feeling it now. But also that, again, I think is, if you ask a great fighter why he's able to wrestle so well or kick so well, he'll say, because after 20,000, I understood it. I no longer think about kicking. And that's the same way I see fighting now. I don't sit around and analyze it in parameters. I feel it. And I studied freestyle rap, and I studied the mechanics of jazz improvisation. And it's the same thing when I do my job. I'm not supposed to be sitting there too far in the prefrontal cortex, kind of listing and free-writing. I'm supposed to be flowing and allowing it to happen and using, 30,000 hours of thin slice knowledge to allow it to happen. So that, to me, is how I watch tape. If you were going to ask me how I would tell a fighter with 3 fights to watch tape, I actually don't have a very good answer for that. I don't know, because my instinct 3 years ago was, let's start with the stance, let's move to the movement, let's look at the distance, let's gauge the timing. And now I don't believe that's so anymore. But I also know you don't get here without going through there. So the other low-hanging fruit answer I would say is turn off all sound and turn on music. That's a big one for me. And Joe Rogan has been a wonderful mentor and friend, and he's done a lot for me, and he's a kind person. And when I've sat down with him for dinner, and we've had amazing times. So, and he's a pioneer of this frame of this era of fighting. So I listen sometimes when Joe's on, because he's Joe, and he invented this style. People don't think so, but why did he stand out in the world of boxing analysts? Because he said crazy things that were honest and authentic to him. But and I'm literally just saying names, I'm not picking on,
Cormier or Paul Felder or anybody. But if Paul Felder, for example, were to say the things Joe says, he may have a lot of similar personalities, but it's an unintentional imitation of someone else. But yes, if you really want to look at martial arts and you want to develop your own voice in it, you must turn off all commentary for like 3 years for real. And for me, it was music, especially classical music. For somebody else, they might like binaural beats, or they might like silence, or they might like the sound of rain or something. But you cannot create, and again, now I'm moving the commentary away from what you were saying about analyzing tape. But I don't believe you can, I was going to say create an individual voice, but I think a better way to say it is allow your individual voice to come out. If you hear
creating that identity, creating your own identity,
allowing your identity to create itself. And I love John Anik, and I think Daniel Cormier is a genius of martial arts. And like I said, Joe is a mentor and a friend, and nobody's done more for me in my professional life than Joe. But if you listen to them, they are so influential at what they do that the mirror neurons in your human brain will emulate.
1000%.
For 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and you allow the structures of television, in our main event, we've got 2 epic warriors at 205 pounds fighting for their thing. We got this guy, but then we got this guy. He's got phenomenal this guy's got unbelievable that. What does he need to do that? Well, if he gets this thing going, but if he keeps this, you will do that. And then they'll walk out, and then you'll talk about the one guy walking out and the other one walking out using a list of stuff that you've acquired off the internet that says this guy trains at this gym. He started his first martial art with this. You'll say some of those things. They'll go in, they'll touch gloves, they'll do some stuff at the end. You go, oh, wow, big right. And you will do that. It's not because you're a bad person or you're doing the wrong thing on purpose. It's because that's what humans do. The reason we have complex societies is because we emulate things that work in each other. If you want to do something different, you must turn it off, and it will take you years. It will take years, but it'll be worth it. It'll be worth those years. And eventually it'll be really cool. You suddenly start seeing fighting really, really different. And you'll see it. For me, it's dance, it's art, it's color, it's texture, it's flavor. For somebody else, it might be, a military strategy. It might look, like it'll be, because it's a million things. It isn't just, is this guy the GOAT? It isn't just who's pound for pound. If you talked about pound for pound rankings, if you talk about the rankings, if you talk about title shots, talk about belts, if you talk about great GOATs, if you talk about Twitter beefs, whatever, you're not a bad person. You're just doing
you're staying in the comfort zone.
The field is giving you a framework from which to look, and those narratives will dominate your thinking. Not because you're dumb, not because you're a bad person. That's just how the world works, and that's how we as humans work. If you do those things, though, you got to think about it. You're not looking at a menu and then ordering food. You're eating the menu. Right? You're eating. Someone hands you a menu. You're eating the menu. What ranking they are, and what division they're in, and what the guy said. The food, the steak, the nutrients, the flavors, and the experience is the martial artistry. What they said about each other, or the weigh-in push, or what, that's the menu. That's there to let you, actually dig into the nutrition and the excitement. If you choose to eat the menu, you can, and I'm not mad at you, and I'm not judging you. But all that shit is the menu. That shit isn't the food. But it's a free world. Nobody's a bad person because they love weigh-ins and people pushing each other, or what the guy said on Twitter, or I can't believe this guy called that out. If you like that, that doesn't make you a bad person. But I was going to say that's the first layer, but it's not even the first layer. These are pre-teases to the real, the food, right?
Yeah.
And I want to eat the food, and I want to talk about the food. I want to cook the food, and I want to share the food, and I want to write songs about the food. I don't care if my television partner thinks that Volkanovski's actually pound for pound number one, and my producer tells me I should say
That's the other guy. And then we make a piece of content, and then we put it on the internet. And then in the stuff underneath, people argue about it. And at the end, we say, "Well, what do you think? Leave us a comment in the things." And then cut. Great job, everybody. Oh man, we made some great shit today. All we did was perpetuate the same crap.
Yeah. Let's talk about the meal. Let's talk about the menu.
Yeah.
It's for somebody that's been in the industry for 40 plus years. I'm sure you've seen firsthand the evolution of martial arts and how it's really mainstream now. I mean, let's be real. When it started, it certainly was not mainstream. What excites you the most about modern day martial arts and where it has traveled to in 2023?
So I like the exotic shit. I get excited. It's not easy for me, like for a person, you or I or anybody, to fly to Myanmar. But you go to Myanmar and you commentate a 1,000-year-old martial art called Net Way that allows headbutts and bare knuckle in a 500-year-old stadium. And like 80% of the people in the country watch that, and it's their Super Bowl. That excites me. And that we can now share on the internet. So that when you meet other martial arts nerds in the world, they're like, "Man, you see that able to do it? You had that." Or Dambe out of Africa, karate combat. I got a lot of really, really cool jobs and partnerships, and they're all, fulfilling in some different way. And they force me to learn in different ways but karate combat is innovative and it's new and it's modern and it's different. When I started working for them, Christian, the guy who's kind of the showrunner, and his team, they literally, we sit around in the weeks leading to a show and go, "Okay, no rules. What can we do different?" Whereas if you go to most MMA shows, they're literally, or most shows that are MMA or other kind of modern fighting, they're kind of emulating the thing. So I find the martial arts, the actual martial artistry, becomes more fascinating the more you change the parameters, and that's always been true. MMA first excited us because there were a bunch of new things. 5 minutes was different. Multiple 5 minutes. First, no time limit. Fascinating. And later, 5 minutes. Okay. Or 10 minutes in 5 different ways. Cage, right? Different rule set. Combination of things. All of those things are always what makes the martial arts fascinating. One of my personal favorite experiences, hard experience, but incredible experience as a martial arts nerd who gets to do this job because he loves martial arts. I went to Russia in, I think, around 2016. There was something called the World Combat Games. And it was in St. Petersburg. And I commentated. I was the only color commentator. 3 play-by-play guys. And I commentated all 3. So in the course of a day, they might each do 1 or 2 sort of sessions, and I would do 3 or 6 all day long. But in the course of a day, you commentate Muay Thai, boxing, sumo, sambo, Greco-Roman wrestling, an ancient form of belt wrestling, all these different things. And that's when I really realized how that special uniqueness of fighting is. In the course of a day, you would be doing sanda. Some people call it san chow, but that's actually not. Sanda is the sport of a particular kind of Chinese martial arts. And we can punch and we can kick and we can wrestle in a number of ways, and we can throw, but we can't knee. So as soon as we would clinch, we pop our hips really far back. Now, if you can knee, you never do that, right? You pull your hips back, and then knee you in the stomach really, really hard. It'd be very bad for you. But since they can't knee, I want to get my hips back so I can't wrestle. And all of a sudden I'm seeing that. And then 20 minutes later, I'm doing Muay Thai, and you can knee, and they clinch, and they immediately bring their hips in. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, now in the course of days, I'm being able to I was commentating 8 hours a day. Like in some of them, they were Sandow, for example, was 3 2-minute rounds with 1 minute in between. So there'd be 6 minutes of fighting and 2 minutes, and then the walkouts would be 3 minutes. So you'd have almost a fight every 10 minutes. So you'd have 6 an hour. I'd do a 3-hour session. So you'd do 18 fights, right? For 15, 16 days straight. You're doing multiple sessions a day of that. And you're forced to be looking at so many things in such different ways, and you're seeing how it all influences each other, right?
and you asked about martial artistry, like, and fighting now. Of course, people are like accelerating in what they learn. A 12-year-old can learn things that it took Chuck Liddell until the end of his career to know. And they, so that changes everything. But it's also, there's a sort of a interesting, bastardization is a way too strong of a word. It's also sort of a rude word, but the fact that you get rewarded for knockout of the night or fight of the night, or you get, better audience response and bigger bonuses for fighting what we might call, crazy or recklessly or whatever, actually is altering martial arts in particularly the UFC. You'll see the Bellator and PFL and, one and whatever too. But in MMA, the fighting is being slightly shaped by the audience demand and the reward for your behavior as a fighter in ways that doesn't make martial arts better. Martial arts is self-preservation, right? Like, self-defense. But you're being paid well and encouraged to minimize your self-defense and fight a little crazier. So I don't like that part. As a martial arts purist, I love crazy jumping, spinning kicks, and I love when people can do amazing things. But when you protect yourself less to get paid more, that to me is actually that's a downside to martial art. But the upside is it's creating people to do, really fantastical things. There's so many things. Again, we'll hang out for hours when I see you and Ross is fighting. But, fighting in 2015 took place a lot closer than it does now. Because in combat, space is time relative to speed. So as we all get faster, to have the same amount of processing time, we need to actually fight further away. So fighting is taking place a lot further away. So what happens? I got to hit you. We can't just dance around. So I start to use my longest weapon against your closest target. So that's my foot against your calf, right? So all of a sudden that shapes things. That'll kind of force people not to hang out there. And what I love is the constant change. Another 100 fights later, the best, Henry Hooft, and, like the, John Kavanagh, and like the very best, you're already seeing them respond or try to get ahead of what the behavior of the organism of fighting. And that's what I love. And that'll never stop. So we'll never get bored because that will never end, right? That will
I think
go
that's
on.
the best part about martial arts is you can never fully master it. And that's why people are always going to be addicted to it. Before I let you go, I want to ask, you always say, enjoy the hostilities. And every time you say it, I'm like, yes, enjoy the hostilities, my friends. What is the most hostile moment that you think you've had in your life? Do you have one?
That's a really cool, interesting question. So enjoy the hostilities, my friends, just started one day. I said it at the end of something. And my wife was like, what's that? And I said, I don't know. I've said it the last 3 or 4 days on TV. She was like, is that like you're saying? I'm like, I don't know. I've been saying it. And then the next thing you know, I was saying it all the time. And then it was my saying. I actually have it trademarked too. Like that's which is cool. If you told me when I was 12, I would have Bink and enjoy the hostilities and interspecies fighting trademarked. I would
like,
never.
Where's the merch at? Like, let's go.
Yeah, I have Bink t-shirts, but I don't really push them. They're at like shoprobinblack.com, and I have them around, and I've got like 40 of them. I give them to some friends. I'll bring you one. Yeah. I'll message and get your size. I'll bring you when I see you in Florida or wherever Ross's fight will be booked. Whenever it is, although I think we know. I think it's soon. I think we'll hear soon anyways. I think Adam and Karate Combat will probably announce it in the coming weeks. But so now it means something totally different, right? At first it was like, enjoy the fights. Hostilities. Hostilities is a cool word. Now, to me, it actually means like internal hostilities. Like if I'll say, I'd like to share quotes and ideas and stuff about learning and change and fear and anxiety and stuff. These to me are the things I learned about by studying martial arts. And now enjoy the hostilities much more deeply means like the internal fear and self-resistance when you're going to try something and stuff. And I think that's actually the most hostile thing. It's like your own fears and your own concerns and your own anxieties and your own worries. Like some people have a very demanding life and a very scary or hard life. And other people may appear to have, I have a wonderful, I get to do I'm married to my best friend and my daughter is beautiful and I get to travel the world, but I'm still scared and anxious, about all kinds of things because I'm a human and humans are like that. And I think those hostilities are actually
the things that the study of martial arts is teaching me to overcome. And or teaching me about that I hope I can share that somebody else will be able to overcome, or some other woman or man or person that comes along after I'm dead, that some things that you and I and people like us shared that trickled down somewhere, got to somebody else. That's in the end, I think, what we're trying to do here. But, you know, and I believe that, but, you know, fighting in a cage or a ring or a pit or whatever, the real, and this relates to what I just said, and I hope answers your question. The real hostilities of it is you, right? It's not logical to go walk out there in your underwear while everyone's watching and get yourself in a car accident that could, you know, will be on the internet forever, or like, you know, will be part of your memory, good or bad. That doesn't make any sense. So you should not go, but you go, right? You go and you do it with courage and you know, you accept the fear. George St. Pierre's thing is like, you have butterflies, you will have them, you cannot get rid of them. And this is his saying. He's like, so you try to get them to fly in formation, which is like, that's such a great analogy.
God, I could run through a wall right now. Like, let's go.
I know, it's true. But that part, that's the thing covered. And I mean this, like, over time, this has been the, you know, the little subtext I'm always trying to say. It's like, people think there's this illusion that we're safer in the middle of the pack. And that made sense. That's in us because there was a time that was true. We should only send the strongest and the toughest and the craziest out on the edges where the saber-toothed tigers are. But in real life now, that's not true. You know, all the action is on the fringes. Taking a risk and failing is better than not trying. 100% of the time, even if it feels like it's not true now, in a year or 2 years, that will 100% be true. And I shouldn't say 100% of the time, because if you try something and fall off a cliff and die, that's probably not true. So 100 is wrong.
I'm going to blame you.
Yeah, 100 is wrong. But a lot, much, most, enough that it's worth it to live that way, right? And the real hostilities are your own fear of failure and your own fear of ridicule. And when I first met my wife, and, you know, I used to sing in a rock band and I was fighting people in cages at the time. And I'm like, I want to do this, what I'm literally doing today, which is amazing to be able to say. And she was like, you know, she said, you have 2 or 3 things about you that are the key. And she's like, you have a crazy work ethic. And that's true, but so do lots of other people. And she goes, well, really the biggest one is you truthfully are not afraid to look stupid, right? And she said, I mean that in the kindest way. But she's right? And if somebody else looks and they go, that guy looks stupid, why does he dye his hair so dark? Like, what an idiot. What they're really, and that's going to bother me, not only not at all, but now I'm going to probably like go, hey, that is just a reminder that I like to dye my hair this dark, even though other people hate it, right? So I'm not trying to please them, because if I was, I'd stop. I'm doing it because that just feels right. And so it's a reminder to you. But what happens to that person is they say, it's subconsciously they think, don't do anything to get out of the middle of the pack, or else people like me will make fun of you, right? That's what happens when you go to Justin Gaethje when he loses a fight and you say, you suck, man, you blah, 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 blah. What you're doing is reinforcing to yourself that people like Justin Gaethje, incorrectly, of course, shouldn't be out there taking risks. Because if they do and they fail, people like me, the troll, the guy trolling, or the woman trolling, will ridicule you. And that's Justin Gaethje's life is amazing because he's lived a life of adventure and risk. And the fact that you are trolling him has no effect on him. It only has an effect on you, right? And those are the internal hostilities that people can overcome them. And it's not easy. You know, they're not, again, that's not a bad person. Some sequence of events in her life or his life has shaped their belief system to fear risk or trying. But I assure people, it's better to try to be a commentator. It's better to try to be, you know, to start to sit on YouTube. Like, you're sitting in your home on YouTube talking to me. I gotta, you know, like, what are we doing? You don't have to do anything. You're doing it because it's interesting. You like it. And you're not afraid that if it doesn't work out or somehow you screw up the edit or you press, I once interviewed Chuck Liddell and I pressed the thing and it didn't record. It didn't record. I talked to Chuck for like 20 minutes.
That's
and I couldn't believe it. And I was sitting there and I was looking at it And it was like a job I was being paid for at a time where I didn't have 400,000 subscribers and, 6 partnerships that, like I didn't have any of these things. And I'm looking at it, and I took a deep breath, and I was really embarrassed. And then I messaged Chuck back, and I said, "Man, you're not going to believe this, but it didn't hit record." And he wrote back, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And I'm like, "No, I'm serious." And then the thing rang, and it was Chuck for now. And we did it. It wasn't as good, but we did it. And I didn't know Chuck that well. I know him better now. He's always been kind to me. But I wasn't embarrassed. It was true. I just didn't do it. Like, I'm a person. People screw things up. And when you see people screw things up, you can make fun of them if you want, but you're going to screw things up all the time too. And all it's going to do is make you fear screwing it up. There's nothing to be afraid of when you mess something up. You should just go do stuff. People should do things. If anybody watched this from beginning to end, close this, follow Maddie and me, do whatever you're going to do, and then go out and do something that you're afraid of, because your life gets better immediately.
Robin Black, you make me want to run through a wall. I think I'm going to run a marathon, and then go do jujitsu for 4 hours and write an I'm grateful list or something, because I'm ready to go. But thank you for always bringing the hostilities. Thank you for all of the gems you brought today. They're definitely gems for me. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So thank you for all of your advice and your kind words. I look forward to seeing you in Florida.
I'll see you. Yeah, it'll definitely be sooner than later.
Yeah, I can't wait.